first of which was first of which was Killing Hills, which just came out in paperback last week, and now Shifty's new release. So welcome, Chris. Thank y'all for doing this. One thing I forgot to mention is one future event, June 30th, David Ray Morris, Willie Morris's son, is going to be here with the book that he's done called Love, Daddy. And that's going to be at 4:30 here on June the 30th, and I believe immediately following that, or at 5:30 or 6, there's going to be an exhibit of David's photographs at Southside Gallery.
Right.
So I don't know whether we'll be serving wine, or maybe if we are, you can have you can drink here and then go drink there.
Yeah.
Maybe. But anyway, congratulations, and thank you, Chris. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Richard. I mean, you're the interviewer. You're not me.
Thanks everybody for coming. Thank you ain't good enough. I don't know, man. It's a little strange because Chris and I have been talking, like I've been talking to other writers and other people in general, about how long it's been since we sat in front of an actual group of people and not just hello everyone out there in the whatever world that is, Facebook world, but to be in front of a group of people. Chris was so nervous, he called me 3 o'clock this afternoon wanting to know what I was wearing.
I thought about, it was kind of hot, and I thought, I don't know if I should wear shorts or not. I mean, that might not be.
I urged him not to wear shorts.
I haven't replaced many clothes in the past 3 years, so I had to find something that fit and that didn't have holes in inopportune spots, especially for the live.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Stream, yeah.
That's a good idea. So I thought what we do tonight is, in a way to stop talking about your shorts and potential holes in your pants, is Chris is going to read just a couple pages from the prologue, which I think is a very good idea because he's so good with this place he's writing in. He's so at home with these characters. It's so hard to pick what to read out of a brand new novel to a crowd, but anyway, he's going to read a little, and then he'll and I talk a little, and then if you guys have any questions, we'll just go from there. So without further ado.
Thanks. Before I start, I'd also like to thank everybody for coming. And yeah, I've been coming here since 1993. Cody picked me up at the airport, 29 years ago. And I really appreciate you all being here, especially in this weather. If I didn't have to be here, I wouldn't have come. So, it means a lot to me to see you all. It's hot. Okay. So I guess I'll just read the prologue. It's not a prologue, it's a chapter 1. I called it the prologue, and then they made me change it because they say nobody reads prologues, so just call it chapter 1. All right. This is the second book in what I call an accidental series, which is now will be a trilogy that I started just before the quarantine. This book was written entirely under quarantine, and frankly, I don't really remember much about it. Before I came here, my editor emailed me a 2-page synopsis of it that she'd had her assistant write. I thought, okay, oh yeah, I remember now. So here's the beginning part, and then I'll talk a little bit about it. If you want me to. At age 8, Alban decided to be a race car driver when he grew up. He assembled model cars, cobbling together pieces from various kits to make his own hot rod, number 11, painted in green and white. He imagined himself as the youngest winner of the Brickyard 400 with enough money for ice cream every meal. It never, ever occurred to him that at 22 years old, he'd be driving a cab in his hometown of Rock Salt, Kentucky. Half the job was sitting in the car waiting for dispatch to call. The rest was driving roads he had traveled thousands of times in the past 8 years, blacktop, dirt, and gravel. A county map was imprinted on the inside of his skull. All he had to do was mentally glance at it to know the best route. He had a few regular fares, severely inebriated men leaving the only 2 bars in town. The bulk of his customers needed a ride to a doctor's office or home from the hospital. He relied on them for income and felt momentarily disappointed when they recovered, which he knew said something awful about himself. For the past 6 hours, he'd been on duty with no calls. He cruised the small college campus, worthless at night, but he was bored and getting desperate. Main Street was deserted. He drove by the new jail, another waste of time because nobody got released after dark. The bars were just getting active, and it'd be several hours before the drunks started leaving. He called dispatch to double check that his cell phone was working and got chewed out for tying up the line. Rock Salt had a few places that were suitable to waiting for a fare. A drugstore parking lot in the middle of town was best, but twice he had been stiffed by pillbillies who'd spent all their money on legally prescribed opiates. It was time for him to find an isolated spot, take 2 hits off a joint, and enter his long-term fantasy of being a race car driver. All it took was a big shot promoter passing through town to hire his cab and recognize Albin's skill at the wheel. He had bought his first go-kart at Western Auto, a company that went out of business several years ago. Albin had loved entering the store from the rear and descending the steps to the sales floor. It was the only indoor vista in the county, one he had marveled at as a teenager. Now, the asphalt parking lot behind the store was pocked with holes, some deep enough to damage his car's suspension. Fast food bags littered the surface, along with empty pop bottles. He carefully steered to his favorite spot, snugged against the old door, its glass replaced by a sheet of plywood. The roof cast a shadow that would conceal his cab. An odd shape lay in the corner of the lot, and Albin flicked on his brights. Somebody was sleeping against the dilapidated fence. Somebody who could use a ride home. Albin left the car, something no cabbie likes to do, and walked toward the man who lay on his back. One arm was twisted beneath him, the other outstretched as if reaching toward Albin. Dark splotches marred his clothing. Albin thought it was mud until getting closer and recognizing dried blood. He stumbled to his car and called 911. Then he hid the half joint in his cell phone charging slot built into the dashboard, glad he hadn't smoked before the cops got there. Chapter 2.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
It's funny you say that about not remembering, because I was thinking about this afternoon during the pandemic and shutdown and all that. Chris was one of the very few people like that I saw regular, and by regular I mean like we would have lunch about every 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
Which, as we would be sitting there, it would feel like it had been a couple of days, and then it would also feel like it had been several years since we have seen each other. We all know what time was like during those moments. But I remember like Killing Hills came out when?
2 years ago,
20?
last summer.
Yeah.
Last summer?
Last summer? But we were sitting there having lunch, and you just kind of mentioned in passing, yeah, I just finished another one and just turned it in. Because Killing Hills wasn't even out yet.
No.
And you kind of, it just like really like, almost since the last time I had seen Chris, this had like popped up and come about, and I thought he was lying at first. But he was being serious. So like, you know, it felt like it was a novel that came to you. Now, easy's never the right way to talk about it. In fact, Tom and I were just at the end of the bar at City Grocery talking about how this is hard and difficult. We were debating on whether this is harder or more difficult. You know, because it's both those things. It's never easy, but still, like, it seems like this novel almost like came out of somewhere, like you just kind of were sitting there ready for, and it just kind of.
I think what happened was I wrote the first one. I started it before the pandemic, and then finished it while adjusting to, well, you know, the tremendous terror of COVID before, and no hope in sight, and then starting to try to teach on Zoom at the same time, and it was a great escape for me, and it was also a way to go home. Like was completely unable to go back to Kentucky. This is set exactly where I grew up. Rock Salt is a model for the town of Moorhead, which is where I went to college. Eldridge County is Round County, and it fulfilled something in me to do that. And I'd also always wanted to try to write sort of an overt noir crime novel. So when I finished, we were still in lockdown. There was no vaccine in sight, and I thought, well, what do I do now? And I realized I missed those people. I sincerely missed going and interacting with them, so I just sat down and wrote a sequel. So no, it didn't come easy, but I had never done anything like that, you know. And I thought, well, I'll just see where it goes. And by the time I finished it, we at least had a vaccine.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense you say it's your hometown because it feels like that.
Yeah.
In reading this book, and you know, I would say too, like one of the lessons I learned a long time ago in terms of like setting and place was use places you know, because you're able to create those places so much more authentically. You know the details, you know the street names, and it takes a lot of anxiety out of just trying to make up a place, and it really feels like that here. And I think it's such a kind of interesting dynamic that the time period that you wrote this, with everything that was going on in the world, you kind of almost went home in a way. And I will say this too about this place, and I think probably a lot of people in here can relate to this in their small hometowns and kind of how they have become over the past few decades. It feels like this is a place where time is like standing still or even stopped, you know, on some level. You know, with the descriptions of just the plywood across windows, and just how few cars there are on the road, and like there ain't shit to do really.
No, there really wasn't. Now it's just there's a little more people and fewer things to do. The biggest change, like the town of Rock Salt was the nearest town to where I grew up, so it was Paris when I was a kid. You know, it was 5,000 people, not 200 in the woods, The biggest changes was town water going into the country, and then they blacktopped the dirt roads, really. And then they tried to change Main Street, and nobody liked it, and they changed it back.
Like I said, there ain't shit to do.
No. They made alcohol legal finally, but that was only in the town.
Okay.
Yeah.
In fact, one of my favorite lines from the book is when Johnny Boy, who's the deputy, is sitting in his office and he's staring at the garbage can and it's empty. And he'd already emptied it for the day, so he'll wad up a piece of paper and throw it in there just so he has to get up and go empty the garbage.
Yeah, not only is there not a lot happens, but law enforcement doesn't have a lot to do once they've found the horse that got away, or figured out did somebody knock a mailbox over, or the intruder in the barn was just a deer after all. And so part of it was that first book was, this is just a direct sequel, picks up right after with all the same characters, is the thought, when there's a shooting at home, like everybody pretty much knows who did it, you know, and why. And if you don't know, you can make a real good guess. And nobody will talk to the county sheriff. And the county sheriff is the highest ranking law enforcement official, and maybe a couple of deputies. The reason nobody talks to him is not out of fear of repercussions like it is in cities, I think, but they all want to give the family a chance to rectify things, to seek their own personal vengeance. And that was the way it was when I was a child. And I thought, well, what would happen if this county gets its first homicide in which nobody knows who did it because the victim was well-liked and there wasn't anything like that. So I just tried to make it more complicated. In the second book, the protagonist is Mick Harden, and he grew up grew up with his grandfather deep in the woods, and left at 18 to join the Army, which is pretty much what I did. The problem I had was I failed the physical and had no choice but to go to college. So Mick Harden is kind of a version of me if I had not failed the physical and had been able to go be a combat paratrooper, which is really what I wanted to do, and was really big and strong and tough. So he's back home and gets involved in trying to help, and his sister is the first sheriff, the first female sheriff. So there are a lot of people don't like her and don't want her to be the sheriff because of her gender. And in this one, she's running for re-election, and she's just scared to death that her wild and crazy brother will mess up her campaign.
That's what I really liked about it, was the side hustles, which that's the wrong word, but you're talking about how, like, you know, a sheriff in a small town, like, somebody's dog is in my garden, like, that's a call that comes in.
Yeah,
right. So we get that in the book, but it's all like, those calls are kind of random, shooting along the sides of there's a not just there's one murder, but there's also something else really bad happens too a little bit later down the line. So I thought it was nice touches of kind of the hometown stuff, the country stuff, but also driving right through the middle of that is this thing that's really big and really bad. And also, she's campaigning too. I'm not spoiling this for you. You'll see this on like the second, third page or whatever. The things she has to do to go out and get votes, and the way she has to talk to the local folk to kind of do what she does. I mean, it's about, crime novels, which people are going to call it or whatever, and crime fiction in general, like, has, like, you know, 4 things like you expect out of every novel. But I think what's cool about this one is, like, the other things that make it really unique in terms of, like, the community and the personalities.
Thanks, man. I mean, that was, you know, I like crime novels. I've read, you know, hundreds, if not thousands, of all kinds of novels. But with the crime novel, like, there's a body, and then you kind of, the agreement with the reader is that by the end of the book, it's going to be solved. That's it. Anything can happen in between, and I think the genre itself has so much latitude for social commentary, and that's type of novel. But I don't know, there's probably a term for that kind of social commentary novel. Used to be more popular, and now it's fallen out of favor. Yeah. Is that the word?
I don't know. Yeah.
You know, those mid-century kind of.
Yes. Well, I wonder, like, too, like, what like this being 2 novels in the same community, like, I think it has an effect on that too. You know, because the depths of, like, what we see, it's cool. You get it in Killing Hills, right? You get a sense of the community, the characters, but here we just get to go further with it. And I think it feels a little thicker and a little more dense in a good way.
Thanks.
Too, that we're, like, bailing off into there and, like, living with these characters.
I mean, I love the characters. I didn't want to give them up. There's a character in this one that I had to give up, and that just broke my heart a little bit. But Johnny Boy, you mentioned Johnny Boy Tolliver. Like, I'm more like Johnny Boy Tolliver than I am like the big tough Army paratrooper combat veteran. Johnny Boy is like, maybe afraid of ghosts, maybe believes in UFOs, and is highly organized and will get the job done, but is a kind of a reluctant deputy. So I just loved messing around with Johnny Boy, and the title Shifty's Boys comes from a character in the first book. Her name was Shifty Kissick, an older lady who, unbelievably tough woman, always carried a pistol in her dress pocket with the sights filed down so they wouldn't snag. I mean, she's a tough lady, modeled after a neighbor of mine when I was a kid, Dixie Blizzard. I'm speaking to my sister here. Remember her? No. Okay. Anyhow, so I forgot her real name actually, but she was always called Shifty because when she got married, all she brought to the marriage was a bunch of shifts to wear that her mother had made, and so her husband just started calling her Shifty. So I knew that I wanted to write about her, and she has these 2 sons. And then a 3rd son who shows up in the book to try to help. He has to come home for a funeral, and I really love this guy, Raymond. So I could keep on going, but why don't you ask me a question instead?
Did you know you were going to do this as a series, Killing Hills?
No, I didn't even know if I could pull off the first one.
Yeah, I really was talking about that.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I talked to a few writer friends, like I don't know if I can do this. I called one guy and said, I have this idea, maybe I'll model it after my favorite novel by William McIlvanney, this Scottish writer from the 70s. And I said, but I'm afraid everybody will notice I did that, think I stole it. And he was like, what? You know, I was really uncertain and unconfident.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't, that's what I mean, it's a reluctant, accidental series. And I finished the third one and turned it in about 2 weeks ago.
That's great,
So
man.
who knows, maybe it's a trilogy.
Well, it's great, dude. It's like, it just goes to show the thing that's been shown in literature and fiction, storytelling over and over and over and over and over again. You can take this little pocket of the world and there's a whole universe there for you to create. And you just keep writing story after story, life after life. And with this dynamic of these people here that are all mixed up and involved together. And I'll ask you about this. I know I don't know if you want to talk about it or not. But a lot of you know Chris has written for TV over the years. And I know there's like, more than sniffing around, he's already written a pilot for this as a series, these books and this kind of notion of these characters and all. And I mean, was that kind of something you kind of, I mean, we're all like happy to get that chance, but still, like, it feels like it's a nice little package to me for something like that. Was that something you're thinking about at the same time, or
I
just
never
kind of
thought
when it
about it.
comes along, you're just like, all right, then let's try it?
No, I just wanted to, no, I wasn't thinking about it at all. In fact, when the first kind of call came along those lines, I thought, are you kidding? I mean, I want to write the second one. I don't want to fool with this stuff. And it was an extremely difficult thing to write that pilot, because I had to separate. There's such different forms. You know, one is a script for production, so people can make something for people to watch, and the other thing is this thing that you just buy and read in private at home. And I like this better. So it was hard. I had to recalibrate my thinking while at the same time working on this book. And then I got confused.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
I really did. I was like, what happened? Where are these people at in this? And then I just thought, I got to make a bunch of stuff up. So the pilot, I made up a bunch of stuff that's not in the first one. And that really was freeing. Like, oh, I don't have to stick to this thing.
That's a good attitude about it. And I think that's why it worked too. Do y'all have any questions about Killing Hills or Shifty's Boys or Chris's choice in uniform tonight? Or
I did. Thank you. I did want to say address what you talked about like the sense of place and all that stuff. That's when I started writing this book. I have to have a protagonist or a lead guy, and that's Mick Harden, right? Who's named after my 5th grade teacher, who I loved, and in her classes, I first started writing. She's gone now. So he's named for Mick Harden. In fact, her name was Jackie Harden, and his initial name in the first draft was Jack Harden. But I don't know, it just didn't seem to, I had to change it. So, but my stance and my approach when I wrote all of these things, I tried to make the protagonist be the landscape and the culture. And the culture meaning how the people think, how they talk, and how they interact. Because it's extremely unique, and I had never seen a depiction of it in novels or movies or TV that I thought was legitimate, accurate, I guess is the word.
Well, I think that's a good point, because what I like about both The Killing Hills and this book is Mick is on the move.
Yeah.
He's in constant motion, so you get to go with him and you get to meet the people and you get to see the dirt roads and feel the gravel and watch see the cabin and ivy growing up on it and hear the voices and all this and that and other. I think it's a great way to show a region and a community that's unique, is to have the characters kind of moving around.
Well, he has to. I mean, that's the nature of an investigation. As they go from point A to point B, talk to somebody, get information, et cetera, et cetera. And we're used to that with either crime novels most are set in cities or on television and movies. And I realized, like, Mick Harden still has to go from point A to point B, but it's going to be several miles, and there might be dirt roads, and there's nothing to look at except trees and hear but birds.
Yeah.
So it was kind of interesting and fun. And the whole time I was working, my wife would say, well, he's just driving around his pickup. She was scared to read it. She was like, this is gonna be the most boring book.
Well, it adds to the legitimacy too, because like when you go riding around in the South or in the country or wherever, there's no direction, right? No. If you ask somebody how to get to Shifty's place, they will give you 14 directions that won't include one number of a road, one stop, one nothing. It'll just be, you go down here a little ways, and you go around the bend, you're going to see this dogwood tree, you take it right there, and you go up the hill a little ways, and there's this old cabin that burned down, and if the ivy hadn't grown over it, well, that's good, but anyway, just keep going on, and there's a pond and a trailer, and then there you are.
My favorite rural direction is to say, well, you go up there where that old store used to be, right? Or where, remember that house that burned down? You just keep going past that. Because it's a given that you do know where it is, or you get on, leave the main road and then go 3 hollers up and make a left. Now, I know what that means. Everybody in these books do, but other people don't. And there's a couple of, not in this one of these books, people come from out of town. I forgot which one it is now. All right.
All right, who's got a question? These are great books, by the way. Killing Hill's in this one. I think it's cool. The paperback just came out. You can grab it and read that one and then read this one, or vice versa. It doesn't matter. I mean, they're great. Chris is doing such a great job of what he's doing as usual.
Thank you, Michael.
Of course.
And the third one will be out in a year. How about that?
How about that?
At least, and I've already got my second vaccine, so I'm good to do anything. Questions, please. For me or Michael. I mean, The Fighter, maybe not his last novel, a recent novel, they just shot the movie of it a year ago, right here in Mississippi. So, questions for Michael or me. Or if that phone is for me, I'll tell my vision.
Yeah, quick question. I saw something that you wrote about pantsing, about that's how you write, by the seat of your pants, which was pretty funny. Did you have to change your approach to writing a noir crime novel from how you usually wrote? Or
No.
did you just start with a body?
Yeah, yes. I wrote that. That's in I think LitHub. They wanted me to. The idea is you write an essay to help promote the book, and so I couldn't really think of anything, so I wrote about this because somebody had said, "Chris, are you a pantser or a plotter?"
Right.
And I really thought, what? I thought they meant like PLODDER, and I didn't know what plotting meant or pantsing. I said, "Yeah, I plot, man. I try to write a page a day, and eventually, a book will come out." And I went home and looked it up, and it meant plotter. Like, do you plot ahead of time, or do you write by the seat of your pants? So that's what I wrote about. No, in fact, this book, all I knew was that I wanted it to, I was going to open with a dead body, so there's a dead body. He's not identified in that part I read. And that's because I had no idea who it was. And I just thought, well, I'll just write a few more chapters and worry about that later, And then, so that's just how I work. I wind up cutting a lot in revision and then adjusting things quite a bit to fit whatever comes out so it makes sense. But I like to write that way because I'm surprised and I don't know what's going to happen, and then I figure that my excitement and surprise hopefully will carry over to any reader.
Yep.
I'm a pantser, man.
Yes, Cody.
Chris, the other day we're talking about like you're big in France, Michael. You're big in France. Like Europe has this affinity for Southern fiction, particularly noir or gritlit, whatever you want to call it. And so I'm going to ask both of y'all, like, why do y'all think that is? That there's this affinity for it, maybe even more so than in anywhere outside the South.
Michael? I didn't even know you were big in France.
I didn't know you were big in France. I've never seen you over there.
Sounds like a road trip.
Yeah.
Well, I have no idea, but I read this in introduction. I think it's Faulkner's Collected Stories, like a couple of years ago, and this really knocked me out because I didn't realize this. When Faulkner was 44, all of his books were out of print except one. I was blown away by that. The French readers discovered him, fell in love with him. He got so much kind of fame and acclaim in France, it bled back over into the States, and that's when his books started to get republished and reissued, and he started to get the notice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why? I don't know. I mean, it's like the question you get when you go wherever, and they're like, why do so many writers come from Mississippi? Or tell me about Mississippi, or tell me about the South. And it's just like, I don't know, we need a panel in several weeks, but I don't know. I do know that the French, I've always liked noir. They're kind of into the dark, and they're kind of into the crime novels and things like that, and I think they've really been kind of into the lit grit for a long time, too. And fortunately, that helps old boys like me and Chris. Do you have a better answer?
I mean, I don't have a better. I have my own thoughts on it, but I agree with what you're saying. My works are also popular in France or in Spain and Italy in ways that are shocking to me. The French invented the concept of noir and was based on movies. You know, the cut-rate movies. Movies are expensive, and if you want to do it on the cheap, the only place you can really save money is on the lighting. You know, anything else will ruin a movie. So there were all these 50s movies that were B movies, what they called them, and they were just dark black and dark white. The French loved them, started calling them noir. That bled back over here and became popular for novels. My thoughts about it is that, because I have talked to the Spanish publisher and the Italian publisher about it, these countries, and France too, have a tradition within their literature of writing about poor country people in a good way. They know they know they're all from that, and they have relatives, and they like that. This country, of course, the United States, has a whole different attitude towards Southern people, poor people, right, and rural people. So I think that's part of it. Is but I've had people in I think Spain say, I didn't even know there were poor people in the United States. I was like, well, they've only read novels that were translated that were set in big cities about middle class or above, higher individuals. So that's part of it, I think. I don't, beyond that, you have to ask a Frenchman or Italian lady, Any other questions? Yeah.
I really liked, one of my favorite books of yours is The Country Dark.
Mm.
And I, when this sequel comes out,
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, there could have been a bunch of sequels of Country Dark. I love that book. It's one of my favorites. And I thought, boy, this begs for, I just thought you weren't into, a series or something. So what made you think this one was?
Really, Country Dark is set begins in the 50s and ends in the late 60s. And I was interested in writing about that because it's about the men that I knew as a child. They were grown men, and I was interested. They didn't know at the time that they were undergoing a drastic shift in Appalachia on many, many levels. But I also didn't want to write about that anymore. Like, I wanted to write about like the way it is now, post-Vietnam, post-war on poverty, with the internet, with the interstate. Like, those are the biggest changes, that in town water. And so and the opiate problem as well. So I wanted to just, that was became an interest of mine with that first one. The protagonist of the first one, of Country Dark, does make an appearance in The Killing Hills. No spoilers. Okay? He's an old guy, though. The other thing I realized is that even though what I loved writing about the book set then was I did not have to deal with cell phones. Like, anything now, like, that's a huge issue, and you see it, people deal with it all the time. It's convenient, it's handy. Like, I can pull out my cell phone right now and look at you all and say, oh shoot, I gotta go. And everyone here will say, "Ooh, that's too bad. I hope he's all right." There's nothing like that until cell phones. If I got up and left, it'd be rude. Cell phones have changed everything, immediate contact. But I didn't want to write about that. So Mick, you know, he just keeps his cell phone in his glove box. And that was sort of my concession to writing about contemporary times, but also in a way that allowed him to have to go around and talk to people. I hope that made some smidgen of sense there. Any other? Somebody else had? Yeah. Yes.
I think going off of that in terms of using the cell phone as
Yeah.
to solve that as a story problem, fix it. One of the things I love most about Killing Hills was the mess that vigilante and family justice could make. And I'm curious about how you used or had to confront that as for plotting this novel.
Should we repeat that for, like, do you want to go ahead and,
Say it again.
yeah,
It's a long question.
So
Yeah.
Killing Hills,
yeah, and maybe louder, I'm sorry.
Okay. In Killing Hills, the vigilante and family justice causes a much bigger mess than simply one murder.
Right.
So as that being an issue for plot, how did that appear in this novel? Was that a challenge? Was that something that was
In this
useful
novel
to
or
you?
the first one?
For the new one.
No, it was the same thing. I mean, it's part of the culture in a way, and Mick's motivation, and I love this about him. And when I was thinking about it, like, he doesn't really care about the law. He doesn't care about justice. These things don't exist. The law is just man-made to protect the people who made the laws, which means wealthy people, you know. And justice has never existed, right? Genuine justice. All he wants to do is to stop further murders, because he had enough of that in the wars. So that's how that's his sole motivation, and that frees him to actually engage the people who are up to this stuff. It does factor into this, I think. Does it? Oh yeah. There's a big part of that in here. I can't give anything away, but the dead body at the beginning, I finally identified him, and you know, that and his family, there are all those things.
I think it does branch out into kind of a bigger spread, though.
Oh yeah, I tried to do that on purpose. I don't want to give anything away, but there's more topical and political, and not political, but
Well, topical, I think, is right.
yeah, and much bigger than a small county sheriff and her brother and a couple of dead guys who nobody cares about. Like, this guy turns out to be the dead body. Nobody cares about this guy, including the police, which is how he gets involved. Okay, I can't give nothing away.
All right, maybe one more question? One more question.
Let's give these boys a hand.
Let's give these boys a
Yeah.
hand.
Thank you.